What's good, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the channel. I'm LotusAsakura, the one who never knows best, and in today's video I want to talk to you guys about Tekken 8. Now, I know there hasn't really been much Tekken 8 content on the channel lately, and that's because, well, I haven't been playing the game. Since the Season 2 update, you know, I gave it a shot a couple of times, wasn't really feeling it, so I just haven't been playing the game, but I've just been occupying my time with other things as well as just doing life stuff. But regardless, I want to make this video today because we got a series of tweets from Harada that I think are very interesting and worth reading and addressing. I haven't read all of these yet, but I just kind of skimmed and saw what he's talking about, and I figured that I should like read these and react to these and respond and whatever in a video. But it all starts with a tweet from Nee, who you guys should know is one of the greatest players in the world and one of the greatest players of all time. And he shares some feelings that I resonate with and that you may or may not resonate with as well. And these are things that, you know, aren't new. Plenty of players have expressed very similar thoughts and feelings and everything and opinions. So let's just go ahead and get right into things. So the tweet from Nee reads, Season 2 has a lot of homing and follow-up attacks, and homing moves are less risky now. When a homing attack is successful, the reward is also quite high. Some characters stacks, I assume he means like stacks and installs like, you know, Eddie's Manga or June's new installs, Afina, Brian, Jack, Asuka. There's so many characters with like installs and like stacking mechanics in the game now. And it's just kind of weird that that's the direction that Tekken has gone in, because that's just not a very legacy kind of Tekken thing, and it's, you know, whatever. While characters without stack mechanics feel very disadvantaged. Some guard break moves are also hard to deal with and carry little risk. To be honest, I feel like the game would probably just be a lot better without guard break mechanic altogether, but that's just me. Why do we keep making it harder to play defense? Honestly, there are so many homing attacks that it's getting harder to play the game like a true 3D game. This is a sentiment that a lot of people have expressed, where it feels more and more like the game is kind of 2D, where, you know, stepping isn't really encouraged or all that strong. Now, they did actually buff sidestepping in the previous patch, but when you add in all these crazy homing moves, kind of, you know, counterproductive, right? Activating heat from a stance feels awkward and leads to ridiculous combos, and some characters can't even activate heat while in a stance. Some characters can be played almost like spam with very little risk, and their play still works. The size of the maps doesn't really matter. Most of the time you can get to the wall with just 2 spins. I don't understand why heat recovery for some characters, meanwhile other characters consume heat so quickly that it disappears almost instantly. I think these things lower the overall quality of the fighting game. I don't want to speak negatively about the game, but it's very stressful to play, hard to enjoy. So I went ahead and read through the rest of that, so I wasn't just constantly pausing throughout, but I do kind of want to address the other things that he mentioned in this tweet. So activating steam from a stance was awkward and leads to ridiculous combos. Obviously, combo length and damage have been a hot topic of discussion in recent times when it comes to Tekken 8. I don't think the damage is necessarily out of control so much so as the combo length is itself. And it's not that I mind long combos necessarily. I just feel like there's a lot of time where it's taken out of the game, and certain animations are a lot longer than they need to be, and there's lots of freeze frames and everything like that, and it just doesn't feel very Tekken, you know what I mean? Being somebody who comes from more of an anime game background, and obviously somebody who, you know, built my platform and my following off of Dragon Ball FighterZ, I'm used to games with very long combos, you know what I mean? And in fact, I enjoy long combos. But I do feel as though that, you know, the combos being shorter is part of what made Tekken and made it less like other 2D fighting games, and now Tekken is feeling like it's becoming more and more like a 2D game. Some characters can't even activate heat while in stance. It's very weird that it's not like a universal thing that I got applied to every character. It's only some characters, and some characters that get left out. Some characters can be played almost like spam with little risk, and their play still works. This is a problem that I had with Dragon Ball FighterZ, and is a big reason why I ultimately stopped playing that game, because I felt like the risk reward got extremely skewed in the reward favor, where you were encouraged to do these very powerful moves and tools and just, you know what I'm saying, just kind of flail with little to no risk, you know what I mean? And Tekken 8 is in a very similar state right now, where I just feel like you are able to just constantly apply pressure after pressure and stack mix-ups on mix-ups on mix-ups and throw out these moves and these strings where the reward is insanely high and the risk is very, very low, especially in comparison. The size of the maps doesn't really matter. Most of the time you can get to the wall with just 2 spins. Between having strong aerial tailspin and heat burst and all these other mechanics, you know, and heat dash, you can get from one end of a stage to another almost every single time with any character, you know what I mean? It's just a lot. Historically, you know, in Tekken, right, you'd have to choose, and FDX has spoken at length about this. I've heard him mention it multiple times, and It's not something I even really thought about in Tekken 8 until he pointed it out. But like, as soon as he said it, I was like, yeah, you're right. Where before, you know, in games, you would kind of have to choose what it is that you wanted, right? So you would have multiple different combo routes depending on the situation. Do I need wall carry? Am I going for max damage? Or do I want Oki at the end of this? Whereas now in Tekken 8, you're kind of getting all of that in one. Like your optimal combo route is always going to give you max wall carry, wall to wall. It's going to be your most damaging combo. And it's probably going to give you Oki at the end of it as well. And, you know, it's just a bit extreme. I don't understand why heat recoveries for some characters, looking at you, Law, with your heat positive combos and everything like that. Personally, of the opinion that no character should be recovering heat at all. I just don't think it should recover like ever under any circumstance for any character. That's just me. Meanwhile, other characters consume heat so quickly that it disappears almost instantly. I know Lee has this issue. I think these things lower the overall quality of the fighting game. I don't want to speak negatively about the game, but it's very stressful to play and it's hard to enjoy. And yeah, I think you feel that at a lot of levels. I think fighting games in general can be very stressful, but I think Tekken 8 right now is one of the most stressful games I've ever played, and it has been kind of hard to enjoy. Like I said, I tried playing last night after not touching the game for a few weeks because I'm just kind of, you know, in limbo waiting for these updates, and I was like, let me take another crack at it, and I was like, it's just not hitting. So anyway, Nee made this tweet, and then Harada actually ended up responding to it with a quote tweet and says, "I have confirmed my perception of this matter with the battle and tuning teams. They seem to understand your frustrations and are working to improve, so please give them a little more time." Now, this is somewhat of a nothing burger, but it spawned, you know, a series of tweets. I followed it up, but he's basically saying like, hey, like, I understand how you feel, or at least he's saying that he understands how you feel, and he's relayed these feelings to the team, and they are working on it, but, you know, give them a little bit more time. Sure, very PR answer. However, then he follows it up with, "My post is a bit wordy on this matter. To be precise, the battle and tuning team has submitted the first ROMs, so I guess versions of the fix for this, and the first phase of it will be introduced in the May update. We already know about the update that's coming in May, which, hey, that's now. So, you know, sometime later this month. Furthermore, after that, there will be another update in June that will be related to the defensive side of the game. So we already know that they're going to be addressing defense and, you know, toning down some of these moves in some capacity. Adjusting combos is something that they have explicitly stated that will be adjusted and looked at. Now, exactly how they're going to go about doing that, I don't know. I do think that the last update did make some good changes, with some that I found agreeable, some that I didn't. The health change isn't something that I would particularly love, and, you know, matches I feel like take longer now, and there's a lot more timeouts, and I think they've got to be very careful about how they do this whole combo adjustment thing, because it could lead to even more of that, and I don't think that's fun or healthy for the game either, but time will tell. We'll see. And then, of course, in June, he says that there's going to be even more defensive related adjustments in that update. I say even more. That's where they're apparently coming. So we still have to wait, bare minimum, at least another month from the recording of this video. This all happened yesterday on May 8th. As you can see by the timestamps down here, I'm recording this on May 9th now, and like the next day, because anyway, you know, I'm always a little bit behind. But yeah, and then there's another tweet that we see. So somebody says, "Harada, honestly, does the team even know what they want with Tekken 8? Every new patch seems like a new experiment. The disconnect between the player base and development team is worrying." And this is interesting because, you know, we talked before about the disconnect between the player base and the team over at Bandai Namco, right? And they even acknowledged it themselves. So, you know, I think it was in that Evo FGC video, right, where they talked about, oh, and we're going to work on some defensive stuff and da 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 da. And it was like, where is this disconnect coming from? Because I feel like these thoughts and feelings and emotions and sentiments from the players has been very clearly and explicitly stated. Sometimes almost a little bit too, you know what I'm saying? Like, people have been very passionate. Some people are really rude and disrespectful and stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think the point has been made clear. So it's like really weird when it feels like those thoughts and feelings aren't coming through and being shown that they were listened to and felt in the updates. Harada responds, "8 was challenging in some aspects with a new team for battle and tuning, but we have returned the team structure to the members of the past." And this is the tweet where I was like, whoa, when I see everyone talking about this. So from what I can gather and how other people are also interpreting this, it sounds like they fired, dismissed, moved the current team. So the developers who've been working on Tekken 8, whoever developed season 2, whatever, they are no longer going to be handling the balancing and the tuning for this. And instead, they're moving back to the team that they had before. which is huge news. Let's finish reading the tweet. So 8 was challenging some aspects with a new team for battle and tuning, but we have returned the team structure to the members of the past. In addition, the director Nakatsu, who we all know and love, I got a lot of respect for Nakatsu. Not everybody does, but I understand. Nakatsu's vision is a hot new meme, just like Harada's finger. If you know, you know. If he was there, who we all know and love, is now able to check and approve all tuning in detail. He was short on time as general manager, but now he gives final approval for every detail of battles and tuning. As you all know, he originally comes from the fan community and was a writer for game magazines and strategy articles, and was also in charge of battles and tuning for Tag 2 and 7. So I don't think there's anything to worry about in the future. So there's a lot to unpack here and a lot to talk about. So there has been a lot of conversation about the balancing and tuning team for Tekken 8. We know that there are people working on this game that worked on like Soul Calibur and stuff like that, and there's been a lot of conversation about that. And I do think that some players have unfairly compared this game to Soul Calibur, like kind of used their disdain for the current season and patch to kind of shit on Soul Calibur when it doesn't really need or deserve that. You know what I mean? And obviously Soul Calibur fans have not taken well to that, understandably so. But like I get where both sides are coming from. Obviously, I do think that Tekken players could be a bit more tactful with how they're expressing their displeasure, or with this, and regardless. But yeah, so if they've got new people working, or they had new people working on this game and working on the balancing and tuning, or the battle and tuning, I guess they got rid of them. I don't know if they've been fired, dismissed, put on leave, whatever, but it sounded like they fired them. You know what I mean? And went back to some old members who were handling the game before. Now, I know people like to look back at older Tekken games through like rose-tinted glasses and talk about, oh, like this game was real Tekken and that game was real Tekken, this was pure. None of these games were perfect, okay? I loved Tekken 7. You know, I was very excited watching that game for many years, playing that game for years, had its ups and its downs. I definitely think it was more on the down end toward the end of that game, but like the first couple of years of that game I thought were incredible for sure. Right, and it had its highs and lows, but that was a far from perfect game, and it had its fair share of BS. I mean, Geese, Akuma, obviously the movement in that game was a lot worse than it is in 8, honestly. And it's just, you know, it had its fair share of problems. So did Tag 2, so did 6, so did even Tekken 5 DR. None of these games were perfect, but I do think, generally speaking, some of these games had some higher highs of what Tekken 8 has had so far, and I think people would prefer to give a shot at the older team taking the reins, as opposed to whoever has been doing whatever they have done up to this point, right? In addition, the director Nakatsu, who we all know and love, is not able to check and approve all tuning in detail. So this is the part that confuses me, though, because it's like, okay, like if you guys are directors for the game, sure, you're not the one sitting there actually like programming and developing things necessarily yourselves, but you are the director. So what exactly are you supervising, overseeing, or like instructing people to do? Were you not already, you know, instructing them of like a certain vision, or like how to, you know what I mean? Like I kind of don't understand this. So for me, there's a bit of a disconnect, but I don't really understand like what was being done before, or how it was being handled, or who was being instructed by who to do what and how to do it. You know what I mean? So, but you know, I'm taking it for what it is at face value. I don't want to be any more of a doomer or pessimistic than I already have. In fact, I want to be very optimistic, because I've loved Tekken since I was a kid. And with 7, I got more invested in the series than ever before. And then with 8, you know, I had a really high at the start of the game, and I fell off for a little bit. And then I came back and I was really like motivated and grinding and happy and like having a good time. And I was learning Reina and doing really well. And then, you know, things kind of all fell apart. And like my drive and motivation and passion for the game is like, you know what I'm saying, went kaput, because I just really don't like the season 2 stuff, as a lot of people don't. And yeah, so I don't really understand, you know, what Nakatsu was doing before then, but apparently he's going to be checking and approving things in detail. So, and will be giving the final approval. And as Harada stated, he was also in charge of battles and tuning for Tag 2 and 7. Again, those games were not without their flaws, but I think overall people would probably say those games were better than Tekken 8. They're certainly being talked about in higher regard than Tekken 8 is right now, you know what I mean? Tag 2 is not a game that I ever really got a chance to play, and I kind of missed out on that era. I watched a lot of Tag 2, but I never actually owned the game or played it for myself. and it looks like such an incredibly fun game and such a cool game that I'm sure I would have really enjoyed had I played it. And I know people are doing like emulation and parsec and all this stuff, and I haven't like figured out how to do that for myself. Maybe I still will at some point. But I was there for 7 from start to end. You know what I mean? From the day that game came out, actually even before the game came out in 2015 when it was in the arcades, I was watching matches online, and I remember that being at Evo and Al losing in grand finals and crying. You know what I'm saying? Back in like 2015, like I was there from 2015 up until Tekken 8 released. I was tapped into Tekken 7. Yeah, I think this spells good news for the game. You know, it makes me a little bit more hopeful. But again, it's like you want to take their word for it, take Harada's word for it. But last time we took their word for things, and we kind of were just lied to. So, you know, but it you know, I'm still looking forward to it nevertheless. And then moving on, he responds to somebody else who says, "You don't need members of the past. You outright need an entire new team." I mean, that's kind of like what they did, though. You know what I'm saying? Them getting an entire new team is how we ended up where we are, and people are saying they want, you know what I mean? So now they're going back because that will probably be better, or at least different, and maybe people will prefer that. I guess we'll find out with these future updates, right? Including you, Murray, and Nakatsu. I know I'm not really one for calling people's jobs most of the time, but you know, I don't think it needs to go so far as Michael Murray, Harada, and Nakatsu need to be fired and replaced or whatever. But the irony of that is the identity of Tekken has gone down with the toilet because of your arrogance and greed. I don't agree with that. But Harada says, so that's what happened with that new team. Yeah, it's like we did that. Like, we did get an entire new team to work on it, and that's how we ended up here. So now we're going back. And he says, also, I already know that you don't need me for much longer. I've been trying to resolve this for the last few years, so wait. And Harada, this is not the first time he's said this. I think he said this a couple of times before, where he's not gonna be around working on these games forever. You know what I mean? In fact, he is trying to actively hand over the reins to the next generation. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if he's trying to retire or what, or move on, but he's not trying to be in this position anymore. You know what I mean? I don't remember if he said Tekken 9 was going to be the last game he works on or something like that. I don't quote me on that part, but I know this isn't the first time he's alluded to this, or even just outright said that, like, hey, like I'm trying to hand it over. You know what I mean? But you know, he's been around for quite a while, and with things being in the state that they are, I guess it wouldn't be a good look for him to like kind of just up and leave. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't seem like this new generation is really ready to you know, handle the reins, or you know, sit in that chair just yet. So he's probably going to be around for a few years more. But yeah, anyway, there's another tweet that says, "This is what pisses me off the most about every video game community. They only love you while you satisfy them. Once they're upset about something, decades of life's work and legacy become meaningless to them. No respect for your decades of your work." And yeah, I definitely feel where this person is coming from. And I agree, right? People online are people in general are fickle. And then they're even more fickle online, especially when they're able to be as nasty as they want with no repercussions, and they can hide behind a random Luffy avatar. I don't know why I said Luffy. It's because I've been reading One Piece, I guess. But they just hide behind a random like anime profile picture or whatever he knows is that mask of anonymity. And you know, people are really quick to forget everything that you've done for them before as soon as you do one thing that they don't like. And that's with everything, whether that's a consumer and a, you know, business or developer, whatever, whether that's, you know, you with people in your family or whatever the case, right? You know what I'm saying? You could give somebody money all the time when they need it because you're well off, and the one time you tell them no, that's all that they're gonna remember. They're gonna bring that up, and then you hold that against you, use that against you. You know what I'm saying? They ain't gonna talk about all the times you did good for them, but they're gonna talk about the time you did no. You said no. You know what I mean? And you know, you might, you know, do something out of the kindness of your heart for this person or that person, and then as soon as you stop, or as soon as you don't, or say you can't, whatever, you know what I'm saying? And so likewise, it feels like you know, a lot of consumers, gamers, whatever, they're very quick to forget or completely disregard everything good that you've done, everything that you worked on that they loved, as soon as you do something that they don't. And I still have the utmost respect for Harada and Michael Murray and Nakatsu and everything like that, and I'm not gonna forget all the good times that I had with previous Tekken games just because Tekken 8 isn't in the most agreeable spot. And at the end of the day, it is just a game, even though it does go a whole lot deeper than that when you talk about livelihoods and careers and competing and content. And like, you know, we're not gonna get into all that right now. You already know, but like, yeah, it does mean a lot to a lot of people, including myself. But I'm not calling for Michael Murray's head or Harada's head because I don't like the season 2 update. You know what I mean? But Harada goes on to say, but that's how the world works. What makes it a little different from other game genres is that, for example, single player RPGs have a constant rating from the time of release, but competitive games, statistically speaking, have a much different rating later on, depending on the time of year. That's the difficult part. Basically saying that, like, when you drop like a JRPG or something, like, yeah, however people perceive that game at the start, it's probably going to be the same way they perceive that game in a few years. You know what I'm saying? When you're dealing with a live service competitive game where there's going to be constant updates and everything like that, and people are constantly grinding and figuring out new things, and the game is breaking, and you're updating with new DLC and characters and da 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 da. You know what I'm saying? It's going to fluctuate. You know, when you're tweaking and constantly balancing things, adding characters, changing mechanics and properties and stuff. You know, as soon as you go in a direction that people don't like, they immediately turn heel and, you know, jump off the deep end and just cut loose on, and especially like online, they gonna let you know how they feel, especially if they feel negatively about it, right? And they're more often than not gonna say their negative feelings than their positive, because, you know, and this is again something just in life, right? I feel like a lot of times, like let's say like I'm looking at reviews for stuff, right? Whether that's on Yelp, Amazon, Google, whatever, right? People are super quick to leave a negative review when they have a bad experience, but not as many people leave positive reviews when they have a good one. You know what I mean? And maybe that's not necessarily true in terms of the balance of it, but you know what I'm saying, it does feel like people are a lot more likely to leave a review on something when it's a negative one compared to when they have something positive to say, or they just enjoyed it. You know what I mean? Because let's just say you go out to a restaurant, right? You go out to a restaurant and, you know, it's just business as usual. You know, the waiter takes your order, you get your food was cool, decent, you had a good meal, you go home. How many times have you written a positive review for a restaurant? But let's just say that the waiter was very rude to you, or the restaurant was very nasty, filthy, dirty, whatever. Like, and you might not be the type of person to write a review, but there's some of you out there, it's like, oh no, if I have a bad experience, I'm gonna tell somebody about it, whether that's Yelp, Google, whatever, you know what I'm saying? So yeah. And Harada says, you know, that's how the world works. I've been here before. He had another tweet where he was basically like, I mean, I'm used to it. It is what it is. I just know that that's how people are going to be. I'll get called arrogant and greedy or whatever for making this decision or making this mistake or doing this because this person didn't find it agreeable. And, you know, he's just said basically like, I'm just going to take it on the chin because it just is what it is. And then last but not least, we also have him and this week where somebody says, fix Lee or we riot. And he says the battle team is working on that too, because as much as I like to talk about Lee probably being the most downplayed character in the game, he does legitimately have some issues that could probably stand to be looked at or whatever. But yeah, Lee players are really interesting how they find a way to insert themselves into every conversation regarding Tekken whatsoever. But yeah, but it all stems from this tweet from Lee. And basically, I think the most important things to take away from this are the team that's currently been working on Tekken 8 isn't going to be doing that anymore. And I guess you're going to be allegedly paying more attention to detail on the balancing and tuning for the game with these upcoming updates. I guess it should be in better hands because it's going back to some of the older people who worked on it as opposed to the newer generation, which, I mean, like I said, all we can do is take them at their word and just wait and see. We're just going to be playing the waiting game. I am anticipating, I'm awaiting these updates and these patches and these changes, because right now I'm just really not playing the game because I just don't really find it that fun at the moment to deal with and play, because it does feel like a chore. It feels like a chore to play right now. You know, stuff was already crazy, but I had finally like developed a certain tolerance to it and was working on developing, you know, my skills and my fundamentals. You know what I'm saying? Like it took a certain level of like, it is what it is. I was getting into my groove and they kind of like shot me in the leg while I was hitting my stride. So, you know, but yeah, I did a lot of rambling and yapping. I just wanted to talk about these tweets and read through them and everything like that and see how you guys feel, and you guys can see how I feel. But yeah, you let me know. What are your thoughts in the comment section down below? Hit this video with a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't already so you can stay tuned for all thoughts and content I put on bringing you. With all that being said, that's pretty much all I have today. And remember, nothing can happen to you swing the bat. Later.